Hailing frequencies open and welcome aboard Treks and Tangents. I'm your co-host Brian.
And I'm your co-host Jaci. I'm the Star Trek newbie who treks off on tangents.
And I'm your Star Trek expert who is here to get the tangents back on track. Each episode we watch and talk about a different Star Trek episode, and this week we watched
Star Trek, the original series, Season 1, Episode 11, The Menagerie, Part 1.
And welcome back aboard, crew members, travelers, guests. Thank you so much for tuning in to another week for our podcast. I don't know if it's going to sound a little different this week. We went to record this episode, and our control board for our microphones and how we record the podcast absolutely just crapped out. We couldn't get one of the microphones to record. Then we got it recording, but then the second microphone wouldn't get picked up. You get what you pay for, everyone. Beware of all those 5-star reviews on Amazon. They're probably fake.
Or someone has a phaser and blew it up.
Or that. So we're in the process of getting it refunded because I am that paranoid person who buys the extra protection plan. So it's just a little bit of time, a little bit of effort. Absolutely worth it, even for what we paid for this cheap piece of crap.
It did a while. It held up some.
It held up for 11 episodes. Probably less than that. I think we recorded the first couple episodes like this. I don't remember.
Well, now we're being nostalgic.
Yes. So we're back to our original setup until we get a little bit better setup. At least we had this as a backup. So we appreciate you tuning in and sticking with us. Just a couple show announcements. Our Patreon bonus episode series just launched. If you're listening to this live when the episode launches last Friday.
Woohoo!
So this is where we do a little side dive into the Star Trek animated series. Not Lower Decks, but the original 1970s Star Trek cartoon. We're calling it Animated Detours. That's available over at our Patreon at patreon.com/treks and tangents. It's a shorter episode, but
it has really cool music.
Jaci picked the music, so any feedback to the music to that you can give to Jaci. But part 1 is now live. We're going to continue to publish a bonus episode every 4th Friday, once a month, until we get bored or our recording schedule flattens out. We'll see, but that's the current goal. So if you want to check that out again over at our Patreon, links in the episode description, available to all crew members now. And as always, we continue to thank you for liking, comment, sharing, engaging with the show. It's more fun for us when we get to reply to comments, reply to emails. Thank you all so much again for your support. But with all of that out of the way, let's just start up with our episode. Traditionally, starting up with our Turbolift tease. That was where last week we gave Jaci the title of this week's episode, and Jaci, without any other information, tried to guess the plot of this week's episode.
I failed.
Well, let's find out. In episodes past, we've had me read the Turbolift tease, but since we are investing in ourselves and trying to try out new things with the show, we decided what better way to upgrade our Star Trek podcast but to integrate a Starfleet starship computer, and we'll have the computer read Jaci's Turbolift tease from last week.
Can we name the computer?
Other than computer?
Yeah, that's so boring.
Okay, what do you want to name the computer?
I don't know yet, but I was thinking like Cassie or Claire.
Cassie or Claire. Tune in next week to find out what Jaci has named the computer. With all that being said, and no name at this moment, computer, what did Jaci guess to be the plot of this week's episode?
Jaci stated last week, "Well, I know what a menagerie is, and that involves a lot of animals, but that would be kind of scary in space. But I mean, that is where I guess we are going to stay. A lot of something's going on the ship."
So, Jaci, how accurate do you think your guess was?
Well, it was very much vague booking, so not very good.
No, I think you missed the mark this week, but
Because
that's
there are
okay.
no animals at all.
There's the animals in the cage in the prison, but yeah, it's not really a traditional.
We haven't seen them yet, though.
We see them very briefly in the episode.
I must have blinked.
You must have blinked. Blink and they're gone. It's hard to guess this episode because this is such a uniquely structured and uniquely formatted episode. For those that didn't watch the episode or don't remember or have no idea what we're talking about, we covered the failed pilot for Star Trek The Cage as our very first episode. That was a pilot that was filmed to pitch the idea of Star Trek, and it was wildly different. You had the Enterprise, you had Spock, but you had Captain Pike instead of Kirk. You had number one as the second in command.
They didn't even give her a name.
No, not really. But they filmed this entire pilot episode, and the studio didn't accept it or didn't like it and didn't pick up the series. So they had to refilm additional pilots to try to pitch it again. But they had all of this footage. And keeping in mind, now, 2025, as we're recording this episode, end of 2025, anyone can watch the failed pilot, The Cage, on streaming. It's been released numerous times on DVD and Blu-ray box sets. It's wildly available. But back in 1966, that failed pilot never aired. It wasn't on television.
Oh, so they were sneaky and they're like, hey, look at all this work we did.
Yeah, so in context, people watching Star Trek on television in 1966 had never seen The Cage, had never seen the failed pilot. This two-part episode, The Menagerie, is the first time that they would see it.
Oh, interesting. And I thought I was watching it for the first time because I don't remember a lot.
So what did you think of the episode, Jaci?
I am still on the edge of my seat waiting for part 2 because there's a lot of hurry up and wait is what I was feeling with this episode. And Mr. Spock is being naughty.
Yes, Spock is being very uncharacteristic. I really like this episode. I think this was a very unique way to reuse the footage and reuse the episode The Cage.
I agree with that.
I think the backstory that they filmed for it with Spock kidnapping Pike to take him to Talos IV really adds a lot to the overall story of The Cage. Almost like that's what was missing. It would have been interesting to see if they had incorporated that somewhat into the original pilot episode, The Cage, if it had fared a little bit better, rather than a standalone episode. Because as an episode by itself, The Cage is not good. It's garbage. There's no context. There's no real story plot other than showing off some sci-fi effects. But when you add the context, we're 10 episodes into this now. TV audiences for 2.5 months have started to grow on these characters. I think it really adds to overall the plot from The Cage.
I appreciate that also. If only they could have gotten a little bit more meat from the Cage.
Sure. So, with all that being said, Jaci, why don't you walk us through the episode?
I will do my best. Alrighty. Instead of starting on the Enterprise like we're used to, Kirk, Spock, and Dr. McCoy are shown landing, beaming onto a Starbase 11, which I'm assuming is like a compound, like a army base or something.
A colony.
Okay, that makes sense. So they're like, hello, we're here. You called us. And a young lady, she says, that's great, you're here. I don't know why you're here, but welcome. And then Kirk's like, well, that's weird because we were told to divert here for an emergency. And Spock, who's my first officer, he'd never lie. So that's why we're here.
Yeah, specifically, Captain Kirk says that Spock received a communication from Captain Pike the same character from the failed pilot, The Cage, and everyone's super confused. We'll learn very quickly why, but everyone is claiming that this didn't happen, and in fact, it could not have happened. Captain Pike could not have sent out this communication to Spock.
Exactly. So they're ushered into the Commodore's office, and in the office, Captain Kirk is insistent that the base had sent a message diverting them there. Then the commander is saying, no, look at our records. Nothing is sent, nothing was received. Captain Pike can't even do anything, but why don't you know what happened to Captain Pike anyways? And then in comes the same gal from the beginning. She's introduced as Miss Piper. So, and she also is like, why don't you know? So then so Spock is there, McCoy is there, Kirk's there, Piper and Commander Mendez. They all take a walk to the medical area, like the ICU basically. And on their way, they're saying how Captain Pike couldn't have sent anything because while he was inspecting another vessel.
Like a cadet's vessel at the academy. So this would have been a training mission for not yet Starfleet officers.
So he was inspecting that, and explosion happened. Captain Pike ran in to rescue as many of the children that he could.
Not quite children, cadets. So we'd be talking about young adults.
Okay, because see, that's why you can't watch it with the little CC thing, because if they don't understand what the person is saying, you write down the wrong word.
Yes, it definitely helps to take podcast notes with subtitles on.
So he went in to rescue as many of the cadets that were still alive. But after doing that heroic action, he was horribly injured. His body useless, basically, but only his mind is still, like, it's like perfect, his mind, but his body can't do anything.
Yeah, he was exposed to delta wave radiation, which, yes, has made him completely immobile. Commodore Mendez brings the Enterprise crew into Captain Pike's quarters. Captain Pike is in a wheelchair of sorts, but it is a fully enclosed wheelchair up to his chest.
It reminds me of the X-Men one.
Yes, a very fancy version of Professor Xavier's wheelchair. But Commodore also explains to Kirk and the rest of the Enterprise crew that Pike is only able to communicate by causing a little light to blink and make a noise on the front of his wheelchair, and he's stuck answering one blink for yes and two blinks for no, which, fine. I guess Morse code does not exist.
That was my exact thought, because, like, okay, he totally could have sent out the message if somebody else knew Morse code. But maybe it can only do, like, short dots and not, like, the dashes.
Yeah, I would imagine, though. Yeah, I mean, maybe it is something that simple. I can imagine that there would be a multitude of ways that he would be able to form more complex sentences. It's also Star Trek. If his brain is fully functional and can light up one light, can he light up multiple lights? Can he light up an orange light for a dot and blue lights for a dash?
Oh.
So it's interesting. Certainly limitations of 1960s technology, imagination. Irregardless, he can communicate.
Yet they still speak about him as if he's an invalid, like he's just a piece of furniture.
Yeah, it's a little interesting. They monitor him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Fine. He definitely has medical needs that needs to be attended to, but yes, there are times where he being Captain Pike is treated like a fully functional person with their faculties and just extremely physically handicapped, and there are other times where he is considered and referred to and treated as if he is comatose and not physically or mentally present. So it varies back and forth.
Commodore explains this what happened, and so they're like, okay, well, we'll leave. But Spock requests to speak with Captain Pike alone.
Well, specifically, Captain Pike seems to have some kind of preference to not receive visitors, and the Commodore asked if he wanted to make an exception for Spock and Kirk and the Enterprise, and Pike says no, they need to go away, in literally not so many words because he's yes and no. But then Spock asks Pike if he has Pike's permission or blessing to remain for a moment by himself, and Pike says yes. And so everyone else leaves, but Spock remains with Pike's blessing.
So Spock is grateful, of course, but he talks to Captain Pike about like a plan that they had set in motion, who knows when. It's 6 days away, but you know what Spock is telling him. You know what we're doing. You know why I'm here. I know I'm being wrong. He even says it's mutiny. And Captain Pike is just beeping the whole time, no, constantly, no. And Spock is refusing. He's very confident and determined to do this plan, whatever is in his mind.
Right. And we have the opening credits.
And we're back in Mendez's office. They're using the computer again, reading every transmission that's been sent and received, calling down to the computer center, and that officer saying, we've done everything possible, looking at it twice, 3 times. We can't find a record. And um, Mendez even goes, we'll do the impossible.
Yeah, it's important to note that it is both the Commodore saying that there is no record of the communication at the starbase, but also while Kirk is insistent that Spock did receive the message, Kirk doesn't have a copy of the message or record of the message being sent either. There is zero record of this. It's not a conflict of the Enterprise and the Starbase's computer. No one has a record. It is just Spock's word.
Exactly. And so they questioned Spock. Like, could he be lying? Why would he want to see the captain? And then Kirk even says, if he wanted to visit the captain, I would have granted him leave. Like, that's so silly. Don't accuse him. And then they show us Chief Humboldt, who is in the computer center doing the quote impossible, looking for everything. And he steps away from the computer out of view of us, but in slinks Spock. He's just like creeping along, getting to a specific computer to where he can put in, they look like cassettes or 8 tracks, to start futzing with their machinery. Chief Humboldt comes back in. What are you doing? I have permission. Don't. It's all okay. And Chief is like, no, I didn't hear anything. So they start fighting, and then Spock's like, well, I'm done with you. Vulcan grip. And
Vulcan nerve pinch.
thank you. Nerve pinch. And then he continues with inputting his tapes. And then, of course, he has to dial everything specifically to change voices because it can't just be the computer talking. Then we're back. While that is happening, we are taken over to the Enterprise where Uhura is starting to receive the message that Spock was trying to send and was interrupted by Chief Humboldt. So she's like, come again? But can you please relay the message again?
Yeah, this is all happening simultaneously as Spock had started to send the communication to the Enterprise, was interrupted by the technician with the fight. It's a weird thing because it could have led to a plot point where like Uhura was questioning the transmission because of the delay, but it doesn't really lead anywhere. The point is Spock is able to get the communication up to the Enterprise, convince the crew of the Enterprise that these instructions and mission parameters should be fed directly into the computer, and he fakes Captain Kirk's voice with just a pre-recorded message that says, listen to Spock. Spock has the ability to command this mission.
Exactly, because the poor Lieutenant Hansen, who they left in charge, has no idea what's happening. So Spock's like, I already put it in the computer. Just sit back and relax. So all that is happening. Kirk and McCoy are still watching Pike on that little computer screen that they monitor him 24 hours a day. Captain Kirk and Dr. McCoy are discussing not only Pike's condition, but I mean, Spock, would he lie? I mean, Vulcans, they are unable to lie. It's against their nature. That's impossible. But McCoy has to like remind Kirk that,
He's half human,
yeah,
Spock, and so he has human tendencies, and Kirk counters that Spock has fully suppressed his half human side. Again, they're springboarding off of each other. They're using each other as a sounding board where they're just spewing verbally theories and thoughts because they can't find evidence of the communication. So all evidence points back to Spock is the underlying common denominator. Did Spock receive communication from Starbase? Did he not? They don't really know.
and then they're interrupted though by communication from Enterprise that Dr. McCoy needs to go back because there's a medical emergency.
Go back to the Enterprise.
Yes, he has to go back immediately, but he doesn't know why. And he even asked the question and no reply. So back to Enterprise he goes. He does not want to go though because he wants to know what's happening also. So with Dr. McCoy gone, Commodore Mendez and Kirk are still in his office. Commodore Mendez brings out this top secret file that nobody should read about. It's secret.
Well, they're talking about Talos IV because at this point they've dug deeper into trying to figure out this mystery. Again, why did no one just ask Spock and start talking to Spock
Right.
at this point is a little weird, but they're digging further into Spock's past, Captain Pike's past, pulling back the curtain a little bit. Again, this all revolves around the failed pilot. The way that they explain this is the events of the cage all took place 13 years prior to the events of the Menagerie. So, Spock did serve on the Enterprise with Pike. Pike was the captain of the Enterprise 13 years ago. And they knew that going into this, but they're digging around the events that occurred during the cage on Talos IV, meeting the big brain people, the Talosians. All of that events became top secret. They got locked up. No one knows why. What is publicly known is General Order 7. Think of it as Starfleet's constitution and rules. But General Order 7 is no one can visit Talos IV under any circumstances. That is what is publicly known. The penalty for which is capital punishment, the death penalty. What is in this top secret report that is revealed to Kirk is not what happened at Talos IV, but it does share that the only people who have ever visited Talos IV were the Enterprise, when Captain Pike was the captain and Spock was serving under Captain Pike. And I just want to say, I think the book, I have no idea why I'm such a nerd, but this is one of my favorite props from the show.
No, I liked it too.
You have this little magnet sealing device to the book. The book itself is hardbound. It absolutely looks like a textbook from the 60s or 70s. Gold leaf cover text. I have to go back. I'm sure people have done a deep dive, but the pretty much single page in this book, I don't know if there's any other
I didn't see
pages,
any other.
but the first page, the little report talking about how it was the Enterprise that went to Talos IV. The font, the layout, it just looked really cool.
Like a diploma almost.
Very much like a diploma.
And they had to cut the seal to open it.
Well, that's the magnetic seal to it, is he like twisted his little unlock key, ran it over like a security device that you would find attached to clothing at a department store.
No, it was fancy.
Yeah. Anyway, that's my tangent.
But while they're doing that, Piper was looking at the screen and she noticed that Pike is no longer in his room.
He's gone.
And so, like, where would he be?
And then immediately following Piper's report, we get a call down to Commodore and Kirk from an unnamed person somewhere on the starbase announcing that the Enterprise is leaving orbit and warping away. Of course, news to both of them.
And refuses to say adios.
Yeah.
Like, nothing.
And we get another commercial break.
So the Enterprise is gone from Starbase 11 under control of the computer. Uhura does receive communication, like a signal from Spock that tells her the Enterprise, as it's warping out away from Starbase 11, the computer's controlling it.
On autopilot.
Oh yeah, that's better. Uhura receives a communication signal, but Spock, who is on the ship, by the way, says, "Don't reply to them. Listen to me. I am in command."
Yeah, he orders full radio silence, not to communicate with anyone. Very secretive, of course. No one is supposed to be sharing details. No one knows where they're going because the coordinates were pre-programmed into the computer. The computer's not sharing. It's just a matter of everyone keep quiet, let the computer do its job. He's hijacked the Enterprise, but no one knows he's hijacked it.
Totally. And just as he's saying all this, my man, Dr. McCoy, is walking on and he hears Spock tell them Kirk is on medical leave. That's why he's not here. That's why I'm the boss. And Dr. McCoy is like, are you sure? And he's like, who made the diagnosis? Why does he have to be on rest? This is ridiculous. Plus, I have seen no medical emergency on the ship anywhere.
That would have required me to beam up
Yes.
from Starbase 11.
And then Spock, still ignoring, he does take McCoy to the guest quarters where that's where Captain Pike happens to be. And you know those tapes that Spock was messing around with? He does have a voice of Kirk telling McCoy, leave Pike alone, don't ask questions, just listen to Spock. He's got it under control. Step down or, back off.
To obey Spock as acting commander of the Enterprise.
Yes, and poor Captain Pike is like blinking the whole time. No, 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 no.
No, I need an adult.
So, and then Spock goes back to the bridge, and Lieutenant Hanson's like, there is someone following us, but what should we do? Spock again says, say nothing.
Yeah.
Don't talk.
They don't know who's following. They really don't know what's following them either, but they're able to determine that it's the size of a Starfleet shuttlecraft, which this does mark the first time that we see a shuttlecraft. Not only see a shuttlecraft in Star Trek, but we hear mention of a shuttlecraft, these small little starships.
I had no idea what it was until they showed it. And it's like a little car, like a train track.
It's like an RV.
Yes. So while that happens, or they're talking about that on the Enterprise, we then jump over to that very shuttlecraft they're talking about. And I'm glad you figured it. You knew this. It's called the Picasso. I could not find it. I just said shuttlecraft.
It says Picasso on the front, but it's
tiny.
Very tiny. And it only says Picasso on the front in the remastered version, which is the version that we are watching. In the original version that aired using graphics and technology from 1966, it is a reused shot from a different episode. So it canonically does not make sense, but
they're so creative.
Yeah.
The more and more we watch this, The more and more I love the brains behind the idea more. But anyways, the Commodore Mendez and Captain Kirk are in the shuttlecraft. They're trying to get a hold of the Enterprise. Hello, what are you doing? Call me back. Silence. And Kirk is really angry. And then Mendez is, well, what are we going to do? Because we barely have enough fuel if we're turning around to get home. Or are we just going to take our chances and keep going forward?
Yeah, because it's been established that the shuttlecraft does not have the ability to catch up to the Enterprise. The Enterprise is able to go faster than the shuttlecraft. They've also at this point figured out that Spock is going to Talos IV. It's no mystery at this point.
Using the Enterprise's library computer, Spock learns that the shuttlecraft is going to run out of fuel. It's just coasting. They only have 2 hours of oxygen left. And then Spock decides that he's going to change course. He stops the engines. He tells the computer that the shuttlecraft will go on some random deck.
Well, he has the computer, the Enterprise, lock onto the shuttlecraft with a tractor beam.
Yes.
So that it can be towed into the Enterprise, therefore saving Kirk. At this point, he doesn't know that Commodore Mendez is on the shuttlecraft, but that's another story. Big surprise.
And so while the Enterprise is stopped, he also calls for armed security to come to the bridge, tells the transporter team to, beam Kirk aboard. And then he says, Lieutenant Hansen, you're in command. Poor Hansen. He's like, what? Again, poor guy. Dr. McCoy is still there on bridge, though. And then.
And everyone's confused because up to this point, they think they're on just a normal, authorized mission. So for Spock to summon a security team to the bridge without any apparent threat, for him to relinquish command to a very subordinate officer, no one really knows why Spock's doing this.
McCoy is very freaked out himself. I just like him. But Spock turns himself into McCoy and is like, as you're the senior officer present, so arrest me for mutiny. Everything that I said was false.
Yeah, this is not an authorized mission.
So the team comes, and McCoy doesn't want to, but he's like, take Spock to his quarters.
Yeah, he specifically doesn't know what to do, and when he says, fine, I place you under arrest, but then he asks Spock if confinement to quarters would be sufficient. So it's almost like, I really don't want to do this, but is this bad enough? Is it good? Is this an okay punishment for the moment?
And he's like, sounds good.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll hang out in my quarters.
But so that happens, and then we pop back over to the transport room with Scotty, and Kirk and Mendez hop on or beam up to the Enterprise, and Hansen is so happy. He's like, it's all yours, Captain.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think Hansen sprinted from the bridge down to the transporter room to relinquish command.
I hope he has more things in the future. I kind of liked him.
Yeah, we'll see.
So, okay, Kirk's like, thank you, and tells the computer that he's back in charge. Stop doing what Spock told you to do. The computer refuses. He's like, all of my command codes and whatnot is crisscrossed with life support. So if I stop all of that, there's big trouble happening because the ship will not be, no one will be able to be alive on the ship anymore.
Yeah, life support would disengage if they also were to disengage all of these commands that Spock has had programmed into it. At least the computer says until the Enterprise reaches Talos IV. And then we get another commercial break.
It was so nice of the computer to say, just until we get to Talos IV, then it's all yours.
Yeah, of course the computer doesn't really understand the consequences of going to Talos IV yet, but...
So, back from that commercial, they have to create a hearing because of Spock's arrest. And Spock waives his right to the hearing, and it's just give me my court-martial. That's it.
Yeah, he waives his right to counsel. He waives his right to a preliminary hearing for his court-martial, and and Spock wants to proceed directly to a court-martial. Kirk tries a delay tactic, and I think he's trying this as out of loyalty to Spock. But Kirk tries to say that they can't hold a court-martial on the Enterprise because protocol for a court-martial would require 3 command level officers to preside over the court-martial, and at the moment there's only 2. There's Kirk and there's Commodore Mendez. But Spock is quick to point out that Captain Pike is a command level officer and he's still on active duty, which Commodore Mendez, bless his heart, says that's technically true. We didn't have the heart to
Retire him.
force him into retirement. And it would have had to force him into retirement because Pike doesn't have the ability. Well, let's think about that for a minute. They could have asked him, do you want to retire, yes or no? And he could have said yes or no. I guess Commodore Mendez's statement would be more accurate to say we didn't have the heart to approach that conversation with Captain Pike.
And see, that's one of the examples where they're talking about him as if he's a like a pet.
Yeah.
And only Spock is fully aware that he's an actual human, just with limited abilities.
Yeah, Spock definitely has this whole thing planned out very well.
To the T, because he's like, all right, fine then. So they bring in Captain Pike. So there's 3 command at the hearing.
And we proceed with the official court-martial, where again we get a captain's log from Kirk saying Spock has again waived counsel. He's entered a plea of guilty, which, by the way, procedurally speaking, if Spock had pled guilty, they wouldn't have had a court-martial. Court-martial is a trial. If someone pleads guilty to the charges, there is no trial. There's just sentencing. So, little factual error. Spock should have just waived his right to counsel so that they could proceed, not pled guilty.
And then, Mendez also reminds Spock, if we get to Talos IV, that's also the death penalty. Yes, I'm fully aware. Okay. So why do you want to go to Talos IV? What's the purpose? And to go with Captain Pike, considering that this is a death penalty staring at you. And then Spock is kind of snotty. It's like a little kid. Like, are those just comments, or is it an actual thing that needs to go on the record as part of your hearing? It's like, of course they're on the record. So,
well, and Spock specifically does this so that having the Commodore officially request an explanation to why they go to Talos IV opens the ability for Spock to speak in his defense and give his reasoning, but it also allows him to start showing the visuals on the view screen.
His own evidence.
As evidence, which is important that it is introduced as evidence and allowed, which we'll get to in a minute. But Spock requests that the view screen be activated. We're going to extremely consolidate and gloss over anything that appears on the view screen. For viewers, this is where we see the footage from the failed pilot, The Cage. We are not going to deep dive back into that plot. If you want to do a deep dive on that, go listen to the first episode of our podcast. And I also recommend just going back and watching the episode in its entirety, just for context. But we do see the first flashback, as I call them, the first view screen is the opening scene to that episode, The Cage, where we get the camera pan into the bridge. After watching it, they ask Pike if the person on screen that they just saw was in fact Captain Pike. Pike blinks once for yes. Kirk has this big exclamation that this detailed video record doesn't exist and is not normal protocol for a ship to take.
that
And
it couldn't even make it. Like, it sounded like they didn't have the ability to do it.
yeah, because they're literally viewing, to break the fourth wall, they're literally viewing on the view screen like they're watching an episode of Star Trek. It's not a fixed camera, it is cinematic camera shots. Literally, they just watched a camera angle from outside of the Enterprise zoom in through the top of the bridge into the bridge, and it's a bird's eye view. Important for context because that is why Kirk is exclaiming that this is impossible, because it's not just a little fixed webcam on someone's console on the bridge of the Enterprise. But Spock, when questioned, refuses to share why the records exist, which we'll explore later. But Pike again blinks yes to the question and confirms that these records were not being taken during the mission. So again, the source of where these visuals in this record comes from is currently a mystery. But the flashbacks continue. We watch the entire opening scenes to the cage where they discover the mysterious radio wave, the discussion of Talos IV. We have the entire flashback conversation of Pike in his quarters with the doctor, where the doctor doesn't offer medicine, he offers booze. Thankfully, there's booze in the future.
Well, I mean, people talk more to their bartender instead of the doctor, he said.
Yeah. Interesting read. If anyone wants to do a deeper dive, go look into synthahol and alcohol in Starfleet and that whole history. It's kind of interesting. But we continue watching on the view screen this flashback to receiving the message about the survivors on the planet, Pike redirecting the Enterprise to go to Talos IV.
So Mendez interrupts this whole thing happening and tells Spock, we're in a court of space law. This is not a movie theater. Then why are we watching this? And Spock double checks, confirms with Pike that this is all actual events, just like what we already said. But if Spock can continue with this transmission, he will release control of the ship. They can turn back to wherever they need to go, and all will be well. We just got to finish this whole transmission that Spock wants to present.
Not transmission, presentation.
That's what I meant. Presentation.
It's important to distinguish at this point in the plot. They continue to refer to it as a presentation. But again, we don't know the source of where these records come from.
And Mendez is like, this is ridiculous. So, nope, I don't want to go further. But Kirk, he wants to know. I think he's also kind of fighting inside. Like, should I just believe my friend? Do I be the captain? That fine line. And then Mendez says, oh, well, one yes, one no. We're tied. But Kirk is like, nope, we still have Captain Pike here. What do you want to do? Captain Pike blinks, yes, let's continue.
Yeah, so it's now 2 for continuing the presentation and 1 no. So they have to continue, which we get our last commercial break to start the last part of the episode. And we come back out of the commercial break to the continuation of this presentation. We see the Enterprise arrives at Talos. We see the beaming down. We see the awkward moment where they discover the little vibrating, singing blue plant that Spock smiles at. We get a recap and rewatch the discovery of Vina and the survivors on Talos IV. And we get the whole scene of kidnapping of Pike by the Talosians, the big brain people, the disappearance of the survivors, and we get the whole dramatic first attempt to cut into the elevator doors that Pike disappears into by Spock and the rest of the away team with their phasers.
But then Uhura interrupts all of this because Starfleet is informing Commodore Mendez that their own monitors are showing the Enterprise is receiving a transmission from Talos IV, and that's a violation of general orders.
And this is the reveal that Spock shares, that all of these videos for this presentation, these records, are the source is direct transmissions from Talos IV. So somehow the Talosians, the big brain people, are showing these images on the view screen. Is it them recording their memories and transmitting it? Is it them using their telepathic skills to take over the computer screen? That's, I think, what the show is trying to suggest, is that the Talosians are using their telepathic abilities and their powers to take control of the view screen and show them these images. Yes, it's their memories, but they're controlling it. So it's not so much a video cassette replaying memories or replaying what has been recorded. It is the Talosians directly transmitting their thoughts and using the view screen as a way to visualize those thoughts. It's an interesting question. If the Talosians have this power, could the Talosians have projected these same images without the view screen? Could they have projected them as just a holographic projection in the court-martial room? Could they have directly implanted these thoughts and memories into the brain of Captain Kirk, the Commodore, and Pike, and everyone present?
I don't know about that because Spock does request for the view screen. So, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how Spock knows that the Talosians plan to use the view screen. That it becomes obvious as you continue to watch these two episodes that the initial event that catapulted all of these series of events is the Talosians must have somehow communicated and got in contact with Spock on the Enterprise. So the Talosians have this ability to reach out across space
Wild.
to communicate with someone directly, and convinced Spock that they needed to bring Captain Pike to Talos IV. We'll cover it next episode, but it's just something to think about now.
So, well, but Starfleet then says, Kirk, you are relieved of your command. This is ridiculous. You are in charge of all of your crew. So, one crew did bad, you're also responsible. And Commodore Mendez, you are in charge and disable this contact. Like, we need to get rid of this, whatever's happening.
Yeah, Commodore, you're in charge of the ship. It needs to be stopped. The Enterprise cannot reach Talos IV, is the communication from Starfleet.
And Mendez goes on to lecture Spock that not only you are looking at the death penalty, but now Kirk is too. Are you happy with yourself? And then Spock is like, no, Kirk knew nothing of this. This is all me. He shouldn't be in trouble at all. Mendez then tells Spock he needs to release the ship to manual control. Spock, he's so smart mouthed. He's like, no, I respectfully decline. And then Mendez is just like, the court is in recess. We need a break. And everyone leaves, but Kirk confronts Spock though, like, what is wrong with you? Have you lost your mind? And then Spock replies that this has to continue. What he's been doing, it's for not only for Kirk's own career, but for Captain Pike's life. Like, it has to continue. And then Kirk orders the security guards to lock him up. And Captain Kirk is left alone in the briefing room. And then we get the inducing to be continued.
Yep. And as we start to roll credits, we just kind of linger on Captain Kirk in the conference room as he contemplates the current situation. But then we roll credits. So, Jackie, what did you think about season 1, episode 11, The Menagerie, part 1?
I'm really enjoying this episode. I am liking how we're learning about the other military opportunities that are in the galaxy. This fleet command.
Fleet command that will very quickly go away and just become Starfleet, but yes.
Oh, see, I don't know. And then we're gonna have Space Force. Oh well.
Hey, I sent you a news article the other day. As of this recording, Space Force just had their first graduation of Cadet Academy.
That's so awesome.
And the cadets that were graduating Space Force wore for the first time the actual Space Force dress uniforms. Before this, they had wore a modified slightly version of the Air Force dress uniform. I just thought it was pretty cool.
Me too. I think that's kind of, I saw that and then I watched this, and I think it all just kind of mixed together, all the different levels. And just like I mentioned earlier, the brains on the creators and the writers, I don't know, I'm just enjoying it. But I did not like that we had to have it 2 parts. That's not fun for me.
Yeah, I will agree with you. There is something about this backstory of Spock committing mutiny, kidnapping Pike, commandeering the Enterprise, the context of the court martial as the reason to watch the events of the episode The Cage. And again, like context, it's very well received from an audience perspective as opposed to some of the other episodes in Star Trek that employ this idea of rewatching old footage. Again, this wouldn't have been old footage to a Star Trek fan watching this on television in the 60s, but there's an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation where 75% of the episode is old footage from past episodes that everyone had already seen. They've done this quite a bit in Star Trek Deep Space Nine to positive and negative results. The last episode of Star Trek Enterprise, we don't need to talk about it now, but again, an episode that reuses old footage. I don't want to say this was so well received simply because no one at this time had seen the Cage episode. And a lot of it had to do with how they framed it in this context of having an episode within an episode that you don't really get to see a lot of in Star Trek. So I also really enjoy the Menagerie, even though it's just rewatching The Cage.
I forgot to add, this also brings up another theme that they've been showing us, that everybody believes Spock is this one type of person that is just logical, only numbers, only, zeros and ones. But then we have to remember that he's also part human, and all of our human flaws and the pros are still in him. And it's like a fight, kind of, sort of. But then we also see that same theme is put on Pike. Is he really able to give input, or is he just pushing buttons with his brain?
Yeah, agreed.
I don't know, just makes you think.
But I'll give some Tribble tidbits or fun facts to the episode. I had to kind of divide the fun facts into 2 parts because it's a 2-part episode, and the next episode is a lot more filler. We spend a lot more time watching events from the episode The Cage than we get new story plot points. So wanted to save some of these Tribble tidbits for next week. But this week, The Menagerie Part 1 first aired November 17, 1966. Jeffrey Hunter, who played Captain Pike in The Cage, was unavailable and too expensive to obtain for this episode. After Star Trek wasn't picked up by the studio after The Cage, he decided he wanted to focus more on feature films and movies as opposed to television. So he went off and started movie career. So by the time they get around to filming, Star Trek has been picked up by the studio. He's unavailable. He's doing movies. He's not going to take a huge pay cut to come on to do basically 2 episodes of television.
Sounds like he got too big for his britches.
Yeah. So, fair point. So, actor Sean Keeney was used instead. Sean's makeup, took 5 hours to apply. His hair was also bleached white to simulate his medical condition, but the whiteness of his hair was too bright for the camera, so they had to after bleaching it and as part of putting his makeup on every day, had to apply powder to the hair to soften it up for the camera. Roddenberry had originally wanted to take the footage from the cage and turn it into a full-length film. They kicked around the idea very briefly after the pilot was rejected, and then Star Trek took off with the new pilots. But again, Jeffrey Hunter wasn't available. There's just not enough footage there to turn it into a full-length movie, so it was abandoned. This whole idea of reusing the cage in a new episode was only conceived because they got halfway through the production of the first season and they ran out of stories. They didn't have any other stories. So they quickly came up with this idea to reuse the footage from the cage. They wrote out the script for the rest of the context of Spock's mutiny within a couple days, and that's where we got the episode.
That's genius.
Yeah.
See, I love these people.
This is, I had to look it up because as I noticed at the very end, you probably saw it on the security officers a couple times, but the security officers tucked up underneath their shirts on their uniform is that cloth utility belt that we've seen before. This will be the last appearance of those cloth utility belts. So rest in peace. We hardly knew you. And then finally, General Order 7, the general order that says it is forbidden for anyone or any ship to visit Talos IV under the penalty of death. It's worded in such a way that Spock wasn't just facing the death penalty for his actions, and it wasn't just Kirk as his commanding officer. Everyone would be subject to the death penalty. The punishment literally is written, and the command is written: anyone who visits Talos IV is subject to punishment by death.
That's crazy.
Which leads to the understanding of the purpose of creating General Order 7. Starfleet did not want the existence of the Talosians to be common knowledge. They didn't want people going to Talos IV to try to study them, gain their powers, whatever the reason, because they didn't want the Talosians to escape their planet and run havoc across the galaxy.
Their own Area 51.
Pretty much.
Bermuda Triangle. All those things.
Yeah. So later on in Star Trek, General Order 7 is in fact rescinded. They do create a quarantine zone around Talos 4, but it is more of a quarantine as opposed to silence and denial, because eventually news of the Talosians does escape out. So instead Starfleet runs a blockade or a quarantine around the planet that basically just means, for the same purpose, no one can go interact with the Talosians and the Talosians cannot escape. So again, there's going to be some questions later about the effectiveness and the plot points revolving around this, but for now, those are your Tribble tidbits.
Because that's a lot of stuff to do for some big-headed people.
Yeah. Well, and we'll touch on it very briefly here. Imagine if those Talosians, who have the ability to create the illusion of anything, infiltrated Starfleet and got aboard a starship and could pretty much do whatever they wanted. They could,
like real-life spies.
Very much so.
Yikes.
So, but we'll talk about it more next episode. For now, those are your Tribble tidbits. And we'll kind of round out the episode by sharing our episode ranking. This is where we pretend the episode is a member of our crew and what Starfleet rank we would assign them based on how much we enjoyed the episode when we watched it. A higher rank episode means we enjoyed the episode more and consider the episode a more valuable member of our crew for our starship, and a lower rank means we think the episode was less entertaining and the episode is a more disposable member of our crew.
I thought we were going to do this two-parter as one. This is hard now.
We were going to record the Menagerie Part 1 and 2 as a single episode as I thought about it and kind of planned out the episodes, I think while the majority of the episode is filler and is the replaying of the footage from the cage, I think there's enough topics to talk about that warrants 2 episodes. So we're going to rank this as 2 separate episodes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Our ranking system, at the bottom, a 0 is going to be ensign, and then we work our way up: ensign, lieutenant, junior grade, lieutenant, lieutenant commander, commander, captain, which would be a 10 out of 10. And there's only going to be one of those per season. And then finally, we do have a rank of admiral at the very top of the list. This would be an over the top episode, a perfect, beyond perfect episode. We think it is the best episode ever. For reference, last week's episode, the Corbinite maneuver, Jaci rated middle of the road, a lieutenant commander. She's ranked 4 other episodes in this ranking system. She's got 6 lieutenant commander spots left, but
I'm not doing a good job.
no, yours is very weighted toward the bottom. But Jaci, what would you rank the Menagerie Part 1 as a crew member for the USS Galactic Glitterbee?
I'm going to surprise you because I'm going to go with commander at this point.
Commander, that's going to be just below captain. This is going to be your 2nd out of 5 rankings for commander. The other episode, it looks like, was Dagger of the Mind that you ranked at this level.
Oh, yeah.
Why commander?
Again, like what I said about the themes, and at least what I felt were the themes of the like double identities of at least 2 characters, Spock for sure. I mean, as a disabled person, I did understand if I was in Captain Pike's shoes, I would not like to be thought of being in not needed. So I guess that's why I put it as a commander, because all the things that happened, it's just hard to explain fully until I get the whole picture.
All right, fair enough.
Oh, look at yours, all spread out and fancy.
Yeah, looking at my ranking system, mine is definitely more evenly ranked. I last week the Corbinite maneuver I put as captain, the only captain spot available because it's the most entertaining episode so far. I guess I should mention way back when Jaci first ranked the cage all the way down at the bottom at ensign. So from ensign to commander, interesting.
Well, that we added more stuff to it.
Yes, and we can always promote or demote our crew members at any time as we see fit or as needed. I'm going to give the Menagerie Part 1 a ranking for the USS Cosmic Shark, a lieutenant commander. That's going to be 1 step down from commander. This will be the 3rd episode I've ranked at this level. It is an entertaining episode by far. Adding context to the story of Captain Pike and Talos IV absolutely is entertaining and a welcome addition to the Star Trek universe. At the end of the day, it is still an episode that relies very heavily on the cage. I ranked the cage as a lieutenant, which would be also very similar to middle of the road, just 1 rank down from lieutenant commander, what I'm giving the Menagerie. I don't have a problem with the cage. I think the cage is a fine episode for Star Trek. It certainly gets elevated with the addition of the Menagerie, which is why the Menagerie I'm ranking higher. But at the end of the day, it's still just an average Star Trek episode for me. So I'm ranking it Lieutenant Commander.
I noticed we don't have a Commodore.
We don't have a Commodore.
I just knew that. I just figured that out now.
Well, I could dig into the lore behind the ranking. I'm going to just spitball it and say that Commodore would be a non-starship rank within Starfleet.
Oh, like a paper pusher.
Yeah, it's probably on level with Admiral. We could probably change the title of Admiral to Commodore. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. So, as of recording, the Menagerie Part 1 on IMDb is ranked 8.2 out of 10. So, very well received. We'll be back next week and to trek through another episode, but first we have to give our turbolift tease or elevator pitch to the next episode's plot before we go. I will give Jaci the title, blah, blah, blah. Do we all know what it is of next week's episode? And Jaci, with no other information other than the fact that she watched part 1, we'll give a brief pitch to the plot, but we're going to change it up a little bit.
Uh-oh.
It's very obvious. Next week's episode is entitled The Menagerie Part 2. So
And they're going to save the world.
I think it's pretty obvious that Kirk and Spock are not executed for their actions.
No, then be over.
Yeah, so because we have so much more Star Trek to get to. So I think it's pretty obvious with the whole context of the cage. Next week's episode's plot is pretty well known. But so we'll change it up a little bit. We'll do our turbolift tease in 2 parts here. There are 2, well, I'll put it this way. There is one big plot twist to the Menagerie Part 2 that is the big reveal at the end of the episode that I don't think anyone without knowledge, without seeing the episode, is going to be able to guess just based off of prior events and the cage. So, Jaci, the first part of your turbolift tease is to guess what the big plot twist is that no one sees coming.
Okay, well, I would assume that the Telosian people is a given. So the twist is going to have to be they've taken over Spock's body and using it as just like what you said, infiltrate, and using it as like a projector of their ideas.
Okay.
Maybe Captain Pike is their god.
Okay, we'll go with that. Part 2 to your turbolift tease. We're going to not spoiler, we're going to watch the rest of the footage of the cage. We see
Okay.
the rest of the footage play out. Except there is one change
Oh no.
to the footage, either addition or subtraction, that is played out in the conference room during the court martial that not necessarily significantly, slightly changes the context of the record of what happened during the cage. What is the small change to the plot of the cage that we see play out in the Menagerie Part 2?
I have no idea. You have to give me a hint because there's a lot that hasn't happened yet.
There is a lot that hasn't happened yet.
We don't even know that if they're in basically a zoo.
So the change that they make is toward the end of the plot of the cage. So think to what happens at the end of the cage. They escape their confinement. They go up to the planet. They eventually leave the planet. It's all the clue you're getting.
Vina is going to have a humongous head also, but they made her pretty.
I like it. We'll go with that guess. Tune in next week to see how close Jaci's 2 guesses are for her turbolift tease.
She's going to have her same beautiful blue eyes though.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you want more show information, you can find and directly support our podcast on Patreon at patreon.com/treks and tangents. Last week, we launched the first episode to our bonus episodes, Animated Detours, where we dive into the Star Trek animated series that's available to all crew members at our Patreon. You can also follow us on x.com at treks_tangents. We're also on Instagram and Blue Sky at Treks and Tangents. Jaci, where can people find you and what are you up to?
I am on Instagram as Jaboom. I have also started playing with the website Whatnot, which is kind of like an auction place. So I have a little shop that has clothing from when I weighed over 400 pounds to handbags, Hello Kitty stuff, you name it, I got it. But I just can't part with anything or in the trash. So I made this cute little shop and it's called Glitter Bow Boutique. I'd be happy to see you there.
All right, and you can watch me stream a variety of video games over at twitch.tv under username Pirate Pound Town. I don't have a very regular schedule. Follow me and it'll tell you when I go live. It's in the evenings when I'm off of work. I'm trying to be more consistent. Right now, Sunday afternoons, early evenings are when I'm most likely to be found online. So follow me over there. On YouTube, I post video games and other random content on my main channel at Pirate Pound Town. I have my coin collecting and hobby content at Pirate Treasure Hunting, where I post infrequently. I do post socially on Blue Sky at Pirate Pound Town, and I can be found on Instagram under Pineapple Cannibal because Instagram is anti-pirate. Links to all social media mentioned can be found in the episode description. Thank you everyone for tuning into this episode. We hope you had fun like we did, and we will see you all next week. To be continued.
We'll figure it out.
End transmission.